Billy Boy. Well, he calls me Johnny Boy. So.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the June 12th administrative meeting. We'll get started with approval of the administrative committee minutes from May 22nd. I thought they looked okay. What about you, John? Or Walter?
I don't have any problem with it.
I don't think you. I will move approval of the minutes. Is that what we're looking for?
That's where we are. Okay, so the minutes have been approved. Second item, Moscow Charter School request for HERC rental fee waiver for school year 2017-2018 by Dwight Curtis. And I need to make sure you all know that I'm a teacher at Moscow Charter School.
Aha.
So Walter and John will take it from here.
Mr. Curtis.
Okay. All right. Well, this is basically the same request that we get annually. The charter school, this is for the 2017-18 school year. They're asking for 398 hours of the HERC time, the gymnasium. It's about 67 hours additional compared to last year, which is about 2 hours a week is what it averages out to be. We haven't had any issues with this in the past, no complaints. They use half the gym. The other half is open to the public during this time. They're very flexible. If we have some event or something of that nature that comes up, they just don't come in that day, and it works out very well. The Parks and Recreation Commission heard this at their last meeting and recommended approval of this, and that's where we're at.
And we've done this for several years in a row.
Several years.
And we require that it be requested annually.
Yes.
If they wish to have it.
Yes.
The staff has not had any issues.
No.
And you're unaware of any public issues? The public having any issues?
Have not had any issues that we're aware of. There's plenty of room on the other side of the gym. We have a pretty good size group of homeschool folks that come in during the winter time, and they use the other side of the gym. It just hasn't been a problem.
Well, it appears to me that that's exactly what the HERC is for. And since we've had no problems and we've got a long-standing bunch of records that they're good people, and I think we ought to continue doing it and add the 67 hours to the agenda.
Yeah, put it on consent. Works for me.
Okay, thank you, Dwight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then you're still here for Rendezvous in the Park 2017 approval request for beer garden for East City Park. Yes.
Of course, this is an annual request as well. It's for a beer garden for Rendezvous in the Park. It's in your packet, but I've put up here on the screen where the beer garden would be. And we have not had any issues with this. This is July 13th, 14th, and 15th, 4 to 10 p.m. As you'll recall, some years back, we changed this from a small beer garden area to basically what you have here, so it would be more family inclusive. And we've not had any issues regarding the alcohol. The police chief has reviewed this and has given his support for it, and they do provide their own security. And like I say, we haven't had any problems with this, and so asking for approval.
I think we ought to pass this on too. We've been doing it for a number of years, as long as I've been on the council, and they've always been very good stewards of the property, and it's a good community project that they put on, so I think we ought to continue with it.
I'm good with it. No problems.
Yeah.
Because it's a resolution, do we have to have it on the agenda, or do you have to put it on consent agenda?
It doesn't necessarily have to go on the regular agenda. It can go on consent.
Okay. Is that okay with you all?
Fine with me.
Okay, then we'll put it on.
Typically has.
Okay, I just didn't know. Okay, so consent agenda then. All right, and then you get to do Palouse Pride Festival 2017, the beer garden request for that.
Okay. Well, pretty much everything I had said in the last one, we're saying it again. Palouse Pride has had their event for years and years, and they, of course, their beer garden's a little smaller. I have that on the screen as well. and we've not had any issues with that. The police chief has also reviewed this and provides his support for it, or has no issues with it anyway. And they do pay for a police officer, though, as part of their agreement. And
A
For
city
security.
police officer is required if this one, the previous one, they could use private security.
Yes.
Agreed to by the police department.
yes.
Okay.
And with that, they're asking for your blessing for this.
I just had a question because the size difference was so different between these two beer gardens. Did you know why? Is the event a
Well, it's
lot
just
smaller?
one's
or-
just a bigger event. Yeah, it's
So
just
they made the whole area.
yeah.
The beer garden just seems so much smaller.
It is, yeah. And my understanding is that they're just fine with that, and
Okay.
it hasn't been an issue for
All
them.
right.
The beer garden size is their request, not ours.
Correct.
And the one for the rendezvous, it's an enclosed area. You have to pay to get in, so it's easier to control. So that area that's bigger because it's a controlled area.
Oh, right. All right, thanks.
I think we
That's
ought
right.
to do the same thing with this as we did with the others and put it on the consent agenda.
Agreed.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll do that. Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you.
Are you through? You don't need more?
That's it.
All right, fifth item is transfer of Hamilton funds for Park Capital Fund for construction of Indian Hills Playground for Mr. Reedner. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. A little different sitting on this side of the table. Well, what you have before you is a resolution evidencing the transfer of $140,000 from the Hamilton Fund to the Parks and Rec Capital Fund for construction of the Indian Hills Park Playground and adjacent paths. This is in conformance with the Resolution 2017-07, which the council passed in May, which indicated that they were designating the balance of the Hamilton funds, which is roughly $2.9 million in change, less a $1 million commitment of funds to construction of the Palouse Ice Rink, which we will get to in the next agenda item, leaving a balance of right around $1.9 million designated to assist with the construction of playgrounds and attendant pathways in parks, which would meet the intent of the Hamilton bequest, which is that those funds be used for as much as possible for the benefit of young children. Council found that construction of playgrounds within our parks definitely meets that. So that's the basis of the request, and that's what we'd ask the council to approve so that we can make this transfer and construction can proceed on the Indian Hills Park Playground.
This particular item was on the list, if I'm not mistaken,
It was number one on the list.
and I have no problem with, I don't know whether we ought to put it on the consent agenda or whether we ought to put it on the regular agenda.
I think it's consent. It's a internal accounting
Yeah, exactly.
for something we've already publicly
Yeah.
done. Gary, will a budget amendment be required after this?
Yes, we'll have to open up the
reflect-
budget.
To reflect it, but
Yes,
you may
sir.
have other items as well.
Yeah, I think we've got about 3 different items for the open budget request, which will occur in August. I would note as well, in conformance with the council's direction, each project will come to you for any transfer out of the Hamilton Fund, giving you the opportunity to review both the project and the funding for the project, which helps us as well as we document the Hamilton files so that we make sure that any transfers or use of those funds are in conformance with the bequest. So you'll see every one that comes through. There will be a resolution attended to each request, and that'll allow you to kind of keep book on where we are.
Staff's not just moving money out.
Exactly.
Well, I was going to tell you, at the last Parks and Rec, they were reviewing all the Indian Hills, the 6 different versions, and deciding what to do, so that'll be coming next. The only reason I would think to put it on regular agendas for that, the obvious, I don't know, transparency to show the movement is happening. So that was the only thing I would think would
Yeah,
be helpful.
and it's certainly up to the council, whichever way you want to go. It is, you'll notice the resolution does instruct the finance director to make those internal transfers, which is essentially, has always been the direction in the Hamilton Fund. Essentially, council designates and instructs the finance director to make that happen.
So you both went on consent agenda, and I wanted on.
I'm not going to fight you about it, but we've already made
Yeah.
a bigger issue of designating the 2.9 million for parks, and to me, this is just an accounting situation. But if you want on regular,
Yeah, you can, actually, we can put it on consent, and you can pull it off at the meeting if you want.
I'll give it even more publicity.
Yeah.
We'll put it on consent agenda. All right, and now you get to talk about the ice rink. You can do that one
Thank
next.
you. If I could invite, we've got Mark McGuire and Tony Mangini from Palouse Ice Rink here. If you could pull up a chair, sir. Sirs.
Welcome.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, I have given you the resolution in your packet referenced in our last item that the $2.9 million, or roughly $2.9 million left in the Hamilton funds. Council heard the request from the Palouse Ice Rink last summer about moving forward with construction of a full sheet of ice in Moscow to take the place of the temporary rink, which is currently located on the Latah County Fairgrounds. When that happened, we exchanged several letters back and forth as to the conditions on the commitment of the $1 million. Council instructed staff to work with Palouse Ice Rink leadership to get the council's concerns addressed. And once that was done, that if we could come to an agreement, then it would move forward $1 million commitment. That $1 million is contingent on several things. One is it's a cornerstone of the Palouse Ice Rink's fundraising, which will allow them to move forward with their other fundraising opportunities. The project, as stated in the proposal from last year, is about $4.2 million. This would make up roughly a quarter of that. One of the conditions the council wanted was that this would be essentially capstone monies, not saying that they wouldn't be committed till the end, but they wouldn't be accessible until the balance of the funding was under irrevocable contribution or commitment to the ice rink project. There's also a concern about meeting the intent of the Hamilton bequest again, that it be used as much as possible for the benefit of young children. You recall the ice rink put on a presentation where they indicated how many hours of time at the rink was spent for youth activities. The resolution also references that those children in Moscow who are unable to afford to use the ice rink will have some sort of accommodation. One of the other concerns was the lease that the ice rink had with Latah County. There was no guarantee that should the ice rink folks go away, the ice rink is left there, that it would be able to be accessed for the benefit of Moscow's youth. In Palouse Ice Rink's discussions with the county, they've changed that lease so that it is more reflective that that opportunity could still be effective for Moscow and Latah County's use. So the $1 million, if they are successful and do access the $1 million, that the intent of Hamilton's will could still be, I guess, pursued. I think that's, and that this commitment would last until, I believe it is June 28th of 2019. Which is the expiration of the current special use permit that the ice rink has on the fairgrounds property. So with that, I think we have come to an agreement on all of the conditions the council put forth. The resolution's attached. I'd be beholden to you if you'd allow these gentlemen to have a word if they'd like.
I hope they. Yeah, just introduce yourselves too, please.
Tony Mangini. I'm the Vice President for the Palouse Ice Rink.
Mark McGuire. I'm the President of the Ice Rink.
Thanks for coming up.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so with the deadline and stuff, you want to kind of catch us up to where you are and what's been going on?
Right. A big part of our fundraising has been waiting to get this finalized, so we're really excited to be here today and get this part of this project completed. Some of the things we've been working on is we put out to bid a design development plan so we can get firmer numbers on the project. The one concern we have for this project is construction costs have increased quite a bit over the last year or two, so we need to get firmer numbers. And we've had a lot of indications from contractors within the area that there would be the opportunity for in-kind donations. We'd like to get that solidified and figure out what exactly this thing is going to cost us. We're currently working with Melissa Rockwood to develop a brochure. In fact, here's a draft of it. We're trying to get this thing put together. So we want a tangible piece. We're kind of following the same model that the runway project, they had a piece that they were circulating, so kind of using that as an inspiration to help with the process.
Do you mean the process of raising money?
Yeah, exactly. And philosophically, I think this working with the city, it's been pretty eye-opening for us. I mean, we've talked for a long time. I mean, I know there's been discussions of getting an ice rink built for at least 10 plus years now, and there's been a lot of emphasis on finding cash. And I think, looking at what universities do and other not-for-profits, it's less about finding cash and more about finding pledges. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to just give money to something that never happens. And so I think that's really one of the main shifts in our focus is we're working with an attorney in town to develop a pledge form for us that we can have, we can document, that's a binding agreement. It gives the donor some flexibility. If we don't fulfill our promise, then they're not out the money. And I think that's something we really didn't quite understand earlier. And I think working through this Hamilton Fund thing, I think at least for me, it was really eye-opening. You start to see it from the other side. The donor perspective is like, it's great to be generous and helpful, but if you're not going to see the project come to fruition, you're not as inclined to want to share that money. So I think that will be a big change for us as far as what we're able to do. We do have another gala event scheduled September 22nd, and we're pretty excited about that, just to kind of reinvigorate people, really promote the Hamilton Fund, the commitment, and I volunteered with our group to become our fundraising committee lead. And I coming from NRS, I've been on major projects before. I'm a CFO. I think I have a pretty good sense of what needs to happen. And so we're trying to formulate kind of a more of a focus group. Bob Stout's no longer working with us. He took a position with the University of Idaho, and it just reached a point where we felt like we needed to go in different directions. I think my goal is to form kind of a small group of people that can work together. We'll target legacy donors. We're going to target corporations and really show what we can do as an organization to raise the money. I asked our person who handles our website, could you give, because we throw numbers around, and it's fun to throw them around, but are they legit? And so I asked them to give us some numbers for the activity on our website, and I was really surprised. So in the last year, our cycle is basically from July through June. We have 38,000 hits on our website. And of those hits, 42% of them are first-time users, which that surprised me as well. Because I figured most people are just going on there to check the schedule or whatever. But there's definitely a lot of interest in what we do. And I think, for us as an entity, there's some value in that. Like when we're approaching corporate donors, we could say, hey, if you want to be a sponsor, we could get you some space on our website, and here's the amount of traffic that we have, trying to help encourage people, to see the financial benefits along with the community value of being a part of the ice rink as well. So I mean, there is a legitimate interest in what we do, and there's a lot of excitement. One of the things that with this brochure that we're doing is we're getting testimonies, and I've asked a number of people to write, and Mayor Lambert was one of the people and wrote a great piece for us. And one that I was really surprised by, and I think I'm going to put it in as its own piece because it's a little bit long to put in just the brochure because it's going to take too much space, is Dan Ewart is the vice president, one of the vice presidents at the University of Idaho, and he wrote a really well-written piece on what this project means to the university. And I think a lot of people think that, did I give you three? Here, I'll give you four. Okay. I know the Hamilton Fund's focus is mainly on young children, but this is also about our community. And I think what he had to say as far as what the ice rink would bring for the university, attracting students, making it a better experience for them living here in Moscow, because I know the school has their own priorities, they've got their own projects, and I wasn't sure how receptive they would want to be to work with us, because there's that inherent conflict, because we're all looking for the money to make our projects happen. But I was really impressed because they see the value of what this facility means for the university. And I think you're really seeing that in the last few years, is how much these different entities on the Palouse have worked together to make some pretty amazing things happen, not the least of which is the airport project going on right now. So I think people are fully understanding that we're all in this together. And so to have these strong words of support from like Mayor Lambert, I got a nice letter from the county commissioners, some other members of our community that we're going to include in this, and Mr. Ewert's letter here. I really feel good about where we are, and I think if we're at a place now where when we get in front of a donor, we're going to have a really good conversation and be able to talk about what this can mean. And as soon as we get that development architectural plan, I think it'll be even better, because we'll have hard numbers. I think it becomes more believable, and I think that's the biggest thing we've been fighting for years. Is the ice rink is a nice idea, but is it believable? Could it ever really happen? And I think the Hamilton Fund kind of gets us onto that stage of now it's legit. These guys really have the potential to make this happen. Do we have enough in us to get us over the finish line? Well, that's where Mark and I need to really rally our troops and make that thing happen.
Is it okay to ask, when the presentation was done in front of the council, there was a lot of information given about all the ice hockey and ice-related activities. Are you also in the prospectus putting information about other types of activities, other seasonal types of activities, and how more kids can benefit? Is that also going in there?
I've got 4 pages to work with, so it's going to be. We're going to have a website that we can put more information on, and certainly those are things we can incorporate into it. But I'm working with Melissa. I originally gave her 4 pages of copy, and she said, "Okay, that's great. Now you're going to have to cut about 2/3 of this out because she needs room for pictures and graphs and all this other stuff." So I mean, we're going to have to be very specific with what we choose to write about. A program I really want to emphasize or promote more is the Science on Ice program that we have. I've personally never really followed it too much until just recently because of this project. And I was talking to one of the people as a volunteer and found out that we have, I believe, six of the volunteers have doctorates from U of I, and then there's another 8 that are other staff members of U of I, and then they also have some student volunteers. And basically, fifth grade kids in the area, and this includes Washington and Idaho, get a college-level experience at our little ice rink. You know, they come in, they get to do all these different science experiments, they get a chance to do some skating. Everything I've heard about it, I want to go because I just want to see what it's all about. It's just a very positive thing, and it's unique to Moscow. In fact, some of the key people that run this thing were invited to Whitefish and Kalispell, Montana, in January, and I happened to be there for a tournament, so I knew they were there. And they were talking about their experience, sharing it with those students. It's kind of just something that was a grassroots thing that was created here in Moscow. So there certainly are other things that we do as a facility. We get kind of irritated when we hear it's a hockey rink, because it's kind of sometimes how it gets labeled. If you really look at what this thing does, it's a community ice facility is what it is. Other seasons, we certainly do have some things, but I think ultimately the true value of this location or this facility is when you put ice on it. We've tried. We right now we have some roller derby teams, and they use the facility. We charge them $25 an hour. It's not going to be a big generator of revenue. Right. Most people want to be outside in the summertime, to be honest. Our focus is really from October through March. That's our sweet spot. That's when people really are looking for activities, and that's when the ice rink is, I think, it's most valuable to this area.
Oh, good. Thanks for that clarification. Is there something you'd like to say?
Well, I just think that Tony and I have recognized significantly the deadline that we face, which is July of 2019, where we better have more than a shovel in the ground. We better be having some concrete poured by that point, and a new sheet of ice being prepared. And so working back, we have a fairly ambitious target here in the next year to raise this money. And getting this letter, I think, will help us move forward with donors that we've been talking to for a lot of years, but now we actually have something that shows that we're at least moving in the right direction, so appreciate that support.
Great. Well, we'll put this on regular agenda, of course, and then you can present and have the same impassioned conversation. I think that's very helpful and to having people understand what you're wanting to do, and I think people get behind that kind of energy. You know.
Let's put it on regular only after I ask a couple of questions, please.
Oh, yeah, I was just talking.
No, I'm in agreement with regular. Gary, the item you mentioned regarding the lease was only one of a number of items that the city was concerned about. I'm not looking for the list, but that list has been complied with. All the items on it have been satisfied.
Yeah, actually, I would say that probably 2/3 of the items got resolved within 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
They were just clarifications, those sorts of things. The change of the lease with the county and the other items that I mentioned were the biggest deals.
Okay. And if I may, I do like the time frame on the commitment. I am aware of a neighborhood county that made a very large commitment with no time frame on it, that they've got hanging over their financial heads for maybe forever.
Yes.
So I'm glad that that was put in there. The conditional use permit, will it need to be redone if they're successful in raising their funds and this all goes forward? A conditional use permit will still be needed for the new facility, correct?
Special use permit?
Especially, well, in the document, it's called a conditional. In the resolution,
Mr. Belknap can answer that more eloquently than I.
It says the current conditional use permit.
Correct. When that permit was issued, it was structured in a manner that would become permanent upon the construction of a permanent facility. So the goal is to provide the ice rink with certainty that
That's
if
good
they
answer. I
fundraise,
get it.
they could develop
Okay.
it and they become permanent at that point.
Okay, so the answer is no, we don't, because.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I can only presume that, I've never heard of an irrevocable pledge, but I presume you have a lawyer that'll figure out how to do it.
They can do about anything, right?
Yeah.
I think this is great. I think that you folks have, as you said, figured out what has to be done, and you have diligently gone ahead and done it. And as with most things with the city, it takes time. And all sorts of questions to be asked. You've answered them. I applaud you. I think you've done a fine job. And I think, as the other two members of the committee have said, and you have said, we are now getting to the point where we're off and running. And we will, when it's, excuse me, all said and done, we will add that to the ball fields, to the Herc, to the swimming pool. And once again,
And all the parks.
oh, and we got parks.
And all the parks.
We got parks. But I think it's a real good thing for the community, and it's a good thing for all of the community, especially the youth. And so, go get them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification about really when you see that the most of the money's made. So the facility will still be in use. It's just that that's when you need it to make the money to really be more viable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we don't. I mean, we really see a fall off in demand by the first part of April,
Yeah.
which that's when it's nice to be outside, honestly. And so we'll have to decide. What we don't want is to run this thing to a negative cash flow and trying to stay open in April and May. If it doesn't make sense, if people don't have an interest in it, then we'll find something else to use it. One of the strategic things we're doing with it is we're using a concrete floor. Now, we could save money and do a sand floor. Coeur d'Alene, that's what they do. But then you limit what you can use the facility for in the off season. And being that we are on the fairgrounds property and we need to, the part of the condition of the lease is to let them use it when they have their fair in September. It forces us to do the concrete, which unfortunately adds to our cost, but it gives us some abilities to use it in different ways. We've had some inquiries about soccer practices there. The high school football team had a practice there 2 years ago when we had the fires, and they couldn't practice outside. So I imagine, use your imagination. There's a lot of different possibilities in the summer, during our off seasons. But like I said, October through April or March, that's our key. That's when we really have a lot of demand.
Great, thank you. I think we'll put it on regular agenda and get to see you on Monday night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, John.
And now I think we have the talk on Zagster. Is that our last item? Mr. Reednaw?
Yes,
Bike share.
I'm here to give a
Zagster.
report on Zagster, which is a bike share program. Last week, or was it the week before, a little over a week ago, Brian Patnode, who is the regional representative for Zagster, came and presented with some proposals regarding, actually it was more of a background than it was proposals, and laid out the program, laid out the types of bikes that they would make available, how they would, basically the overview of their program. Invited were University of Idaho representatives of local biking interests. Council members were there. So it was kind of a good deal for to get some idea about what's been going on. I know Councilmember Bonzo has been interfacing with Zagster for some time, with not a lot of success, but they finally were able to do a personal visit. They came down. They are responding to a RFP or RFQ at Washington State University to try and provide bike share services over there. They're very motivated to have the city of Moscow also participate at this time. We've been requested to provide them a letter of preferred vendor with them, which talked to the mayor, and he has declined to do that. Certainly willing to send a letter that says, appreciate your interest, you're certainly a contender, but we've not even had a chance to look at other vendors for their viability. I did have an opportunity to meet with Les McDonald, who has an interest in this, as you know. He's provided me several other vendors and some background on those, so hopefully we'll get the conversation started. However, the mayor is willing to send Zagster a letter indicating that we appreciate working with them. Certainly they're in the running for viability should we want to pursue such a program, so we will send that out to them this week. But as it sits right now, I've had conversations with the very same Dan Ewert, who penned that nice letter for PIR about the university's interest in bike sharing. He said certainly they have an interest, but they're still discussing as well. So it's very much up in the air. It's good to get some information. Be happy to, in fact, we probably ought to scan that and send that and make that available to all council members for you to review. I will say that Mr. Patnode is fairly new to his position, and a little light on some of the details regarding finances. And John was there as well. Catherine was there. The mayor attended. Jim Boland was there. So I think very enthusiastic, good product. How really does it work, and what does it really cost, I think was what mostly came up. And that was in later discussions with Brian. Those were kind of the things that we talked about. Jen and I had a conference call with him about a week and a half, 2 weeks before he came down, and we had the same questions. So it wasn't really fully developed when it came to us. As I said, seems like a good idea. They've got a pretty good product. They've got pretty good electronics and apps. Whether it works for us, who knows? I will say that their basic proposal was 4 bikes for in a rack that would hold 5 bikes. That's right, 5 bikes in a rack that would hold 10 bikes, and that would cost $9,000 a year. But he didn't indicate whether there was a free period of time for people to use the bikes. Typically, it's a half hour to an hour in a metro area. Of course, in Moscow, you can get pretty much across town in a half hour to an hour. So I don't know if that's really a revenue model that will work for them. So we didn't have that information. The rate, I believe Brian said, somewhere between $2 and $4 an hour. They have restrictions on who can utilize the bikes. If you're under the age of 18, you're not allowed to use the bikes because of liability concerns, so on and so forth. And it does require an app or a credit card so that you have some responsibility in case the bike is misplaced or is not returned. So there's a lot of those things going on that still need to be fleshed out. So we will continue to keep the council informed. We'll provide that letter, as I indicated, to Zagster. As we develop that additional information that Les did the initial review, we'll get that to you as well, and you can move the discussion forward as you see fit.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to see this, like, even have more discussion about it at the council meeting to try to get everybody to know about it.
I think we are way far from having a discussion at the council meeting. I think we've got to flesh this out considerably, especially the things that Gary just talked about. And I think there are more than those. Naturally, cost is a big issue. If it was a one-time cost, that would be one thing. But it appears as though it's a annual cost, and their own words were, you would be lucky, the city would be lucky to recover 25% of the amount of money that we put forward. And that would have to be discussed and have more information on that. So I personally am not ready to have the city council dive into this at this point. I don't know about.
Gary, is anybody developing information on other cities' success or failure of the program, or this or a similar program?
Yeah, they provided information. Fort Collins uses Zagster, so they had some of their case studies. Certainly there are others out there. City of Seattle right now is going through a pretty negative case study on their bike share program. There's a Zagster station, a singular Zagster station in their city, but they had a fairly expensive bike share program that apparently did not pan out very well. And that was endorsed by the city council, and so they're searching for different ways
The city
to proceed.
put 4 or 5 bikes down here 5 or 6 years ago, and I think we're either down to 1 or that's Kathleen's bike. I'm not sure which
Yeah,
it is.
it's Kathleen's bike, and
Oh.
I think your estimate of time is generous. You've been on council longer than you think, because it's been about 10 years or so. And yes, we had, and previous to that, we had a bike share program.
They were used pretty good to start.
Yep.
And then I don't know, then it kind of takes.
Some of them failed to return because you just took them and used them, and they get left in dumpsters and get left in the creek and so on and so forth. So the Zagster idea of having some financial commitment to your use of the bike makes sense. Yeah. So, yeah, it may be something that we'll definitely provide further information how other towns are doing it.
Yeah, and we were talking more about the connectivity for transportation pieces for students getting to the buses and going shopping and different things like that. So it's
So let the university do it.
Well, and certainly
they usually
Transportation Commission might be interested as well.
yeah, so it's a whole partnership and thing. They're in 140 markets. They've been around since 2006, I think.
Yep.
So, it's a model that is working. We just don't know if it's here yet. Well, thank you for the summation. Appreciate it. And with that, I think we are ready to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Got through it.